The one day of my life that people always ask about was D-Day, June 6, 1944, when I was Life's London picture editor and had 6 photographers assigned to D-Day to cover what became known as D-Day, one of the most crucial days in modern history. Robert Capa volunteered to go in with the first wave on the beach, which was codenamed Omaha in Normandy. And I waited all day Tuesday to hear from Capa, and all day Wednesday, anxiously awaiting the first pictures of the Allied landing. Only one had comes from another photographer who had barely gotten his feet wet and gone back to England. And the whole world was waiting for Capa's D-Day pictures. Finally, late Wednesday afternoon, I got a call. Capa's film is on the way. And shortly after 6 o'clock, a courier arrived from the beach with a packet addressed. And Bob, in a note, handwritten note, Bob wrote, "John, the action is all in 4 rolls of 35 millimeter. So I told the darkroom to rush development so I could have contacts for editing. A few minutes later, an almost hysterical young lad named Dennis Banks came rushing into my office saying, "John, the films are ruined." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You were in such a hurry that I put them in the locker to dry, which was normal, but closed the doors, and there was too much heat, and the emulsion ran." I said, "Oh my God." So I ran back to the darkroom with him and looked up, and there was nothing on the 3 of those 4 rolls. But on the 4th, there were 4 discernible images. And those were the ones that became famous. I was so glad when this little book was finally published in France on the 60th anniversary of D-Day, because it has every one of those 11 images, the best account of D-Day in a nutshell. I'm so glad that this finally appeared. Bob Capa himself never accused me. I was the person responsible, actually, for Life's D-Day operation. And I used to feel terrible about losing those other rolls of film, but I finally took pride in having saved the ones that still exist.
Margaret Bourke White was a very popular and prominent photographer before World War II broke out. She, in 1941, had been the only foreign correspondent to document the German invasion of Russia. Margaret Bourke White was determined to go on a bombing run. So she finally gets permission to go to North Africa, although she's told she's not allowed to fly because it's too dangerous. She'll have to go on a ship, a troop ship that's taking nurses to North Africa. She gets on this troop ship only to have it torpedoed. It sinks. She saves 2 of her 6 cameras, spends 8 hours in a lifeboat before being rescued. When she gets to North Africa, the general says, "Well, since you've already been torpedoed, you can go on a bombing run." She spends a week getting ready, so she practices in the hot desert so that she can maneuver. Goes on the bombing run. gets extraordinary pictures. Her plane is shot several times, although lightly damaged, and 2 of the bombers on the bombing run actually are shot down. Margaret Bourke-White continues to get herself in the heart of the action. She covers the campaign in Italy. She's at Buchenwald when it's liberated, and she provides an extraordinary photographic record of all the various campaigns in Europe of World War II.
While the boys are in the bunker, I'm on the hunt for evidence of Hitler's last moves. There's no film of his death, and only a few eyewitness statements. But there is an expert on Hitler's suicide.
Christian, how you doing? Jeff.
Hello.
Christian Goeschel is a research fellow at the University of London.
Hitler was in a very fragile mental and physical state in the bunker, in which he had been living for weeks. There was no sunlight in the bunker, and Hitler began to neglect his physical appearance. He had been known to wear very tidy uniforms. He used to be obsessed with hygiene, but members of his entourage later said, "Oh, Hitler is finally having cake crumbs on his mustache. He's trembling."
And boom!
Hitler's physical condition in the last months of his life was, according to all accounts of people who saw him, deteriorating quite rapidly. He almost certainly had Parkinson's disease. He was shaking in his left hand. He was shuffling.
He had lost control of the events, but still, Hitler was the uncontested leader of the Nazi Party and of Germany.
One of the extraordinary things about the last days in the bunker, of course, is that Hitler still thought he was commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He thought he was still moving armies around. He sent out fantastic orders which never got to anybody. But of course, German resistance had more or less collapsed. The armies were fantasies. Hitler was basically just playing some vast war game.
And action.
In Hitler's private study, above his desk, he famously had a portrait of Frederick the Great. The boys have a clever trick that will allow them to add their own in later.
Hitler looked at it very often because he thought Frederick the Great of Prussia was a German hero, how he fought the 7 Years' War.
Frederick the Great had turned things around in the 7 Years' War. Berlin had been invaded. It looked as if all was lost, but somehow then he'd managed to rescue the situation and turned out victorious.
Are you happy with the lights? More or less.
Using more of our special green board, Colin plans to confront our Hitler with a map of his defeats.
That's good. I'd probably like about a good 10 seconds of just looking at the green picture.
Before I pick up the gun?
Before you pick up the gun.
Yeah.
Okay. And action.
The gun we're using is a replica Walther 7.65 pistol, the exact gun found beside Hitler's body. But what happened on the 30th of April, 1945?